Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the International Peace Coalition. This is our 55th meeting, so over a year of meeting throughout the world, bringing people together of many different ideologies and cultures and nations to come together for true peace. And thank you all for joining us. We very much appreciate especially new people who are joining us today. During the discussion period, please, if you are new, introduce yourself. Let us know where you're from, what organization you're with, and what kind of organizing you're doing. We really want to encourage as much collaboration and coordination around the world as possible. My name is Anastasia Battle. I'll be your moderator today, as well as my co-moderator, Dennis Speed. And we have a number of very important discussions today around the peace proposal that was put forward by Putin. If you saw in the email that was sent out, we'll have more dialogue around that. We have a direct response to that from leading German political figures on what this means and what we can do with this. I would definitely want to encourage more discussion around that. But to start us off, I'd like Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who is the founder of the Schiller Institute and the initiator of the International Peace Coalition. So why don't you go ahead and get us started, Helga?
Yes, hello to all of you. I think there is a terrible feeling many people have that the war machine is coming closer and closer, and that the situation is escalating by the day. And more important people are also warning that, you know, it will take 3 to 5 months before we will have a big war in Europe. This is the statement by the Serbian President Vučić, who says he is preparing his population for such a war to come. Now that puts us shortly before the US election, and I would concur that, you know, given the strategic dynamic, this is the most dangerous period at all. You know, in this situation, the proposal made by President Putin on the 14th of June, when he spoke for 1 hour in front of members of the Foreign Ministry of Russia, where he laid out in great detail a proposal for a Eurasian security architecture, a new one, which should be integrative, and it should be based on, you know, the principles of the 5 principles of coexistence, the respect for sovereignty, and it is open, according to Putin, from NATO members to join. Now, the permanent representative of Russia in Geneva for the United Nations, Gennady Gatilov, just made an elaboration of that, where he says it is very clear that the Euro-Atlantic security system has completely failed, and that Putin's proposal is supposed to be the foundation for a new global security architecture in the era of multipolarity. Now, those among you who have been following us since the beginning of the special military operation in Ukraine will remember that immediately afterwards, I made a proposal for a global security and development architecture, which is supposed to take into account the interest of every single country on the planet. And that in the meantime, I have proposed 10 principles which should be and must be considered for such a new architecture to actually really function. And if you compare what we have been saying in the IPC for the last year or so and longer in the Schiller Institute, you will find that there is a very large affinity between what Putin has laid out and what we have been fighting for. Now, it is obvious that the mainstream media did not report this Putin proposal in full length. They choose to only pick the very last paragraphs, which was a peace proposal to settle the Ukraine crisis. And they immediately rejected it. Scholz rejected it, and others. But that was only one element of this much larger conception to have an all-Eurasian security architecture. Now, this is, I think, extremely important to be discussed. And this is why we invited one of the inspirators of this, an appeal coming from the umbrella organization of all East German associations, Mr. Bonatz, who is one of the initiators of this international appeal, to speak to us. But before we get to that, let me just say a couple of more things. Now, Putin has moved in the last several days to North Korea, where he got an incredibly friendly reception, big with all fanfares. And he concluded there a new strategic military alliance with North Korea, and also indicated that Russia will supply North Korea with high precision, long range weapons, and they made a security pact whereby if one of the two countries will be attacked, it will immediately be answered with a military response from both. Now, the American expert, Gilbert Doctorow, wrote a very interesting comment on this new Russia-North Korea strategic alliance by basically putting forward the hypothesis that this is a Russian asymmetric response to the provocations coming from NATO. And that Putin has proven with that asymmetric response that he is able to respond to these provocations without resorting to the use of nuclear weapons, which obviously would be the trigger point for a much larger, if not a global conflict. And that Russia also has indicated that they will supply all adversaries of the United States with similar weapons like the Houthis in Yemen, and that way, have this kind of asymmetric escalation. So I think this creates definitely a new situation. And I think it's quite noteworthy that Sergei Glaziev, a Russian economist, has put out a lengthy statement where he says that the cause of this military escalation is the bankruptcy of the Western financial system, which is sooner or later going to erupt in a full-scale social and economic catastrophe if the United States insists to keep this system up by all cost. Now, this is very interesting because that is exactly what my late husband, Lyndon LaRouche, has been saying actually since 1971, ever when Nixon abandoned the fixed exchange rate system, where Lyndon LaRouche said this will lead to a new depression, a new danger of war, and a new fascism. So I think that is actually where we are at right now. Now, Maria Zakharova, the spokeswoman of the Russian Foreign Ministry, also repeated the call of Russia that Russia that the United States must withdraw all nuclear weapons from Europe because they have no point being there, thousands of miles away from the United States. And at our recent conference of the Schiller Institute this past weekend, Rainer Rupp, known analysts of Russian affairs, noted the fact that when he participated in or watched some of the NATO maneuvers, it was actually mind-boggling with what ease the dropping of nuclear weapons on Germany was part of the exercises. And he said, why would Europe keep nuclear weapons which do nothing for their security, but which make them really juicy targets? So I think that call I would like to propose to the IPC that we should support the call that to get all weapons, all nuclear weapons in Europe out. That is actually, all American weapons, that is. But then, move on to have more ways to eliminate all weapons of mass destruction. Now, in the meantime, we also have gotten reports from concerned citizens because, people are watching what we are saying increasingly. And we got reports where people reported that what Pistorius, the German defense minister, has been preaching, namely to make Germany war ready and other European countries war ready, which is an outrage that this should even be proposed in Germany after 80 years and total loss of memory of our horrible history of the 20th century. But obviously Pistorius has no such knowledge about history. But people are concerned about that. So we got one report that in one European country, a NATO country, there is a shooting teaching, like a club. And they report that there have been thousands of Ukrainians being trained to learn shooting, and that the whole neighborhood is all the time, sleepless because this shooting is going on all day long. And from another concerned citizen, we got the report that a large vehicle fleet, or somebody who owns a large vehicle fleet of several hundred trucks, was approached by the government de facto. And he was told that if it comes to a pre-war situation, then his entire vehicle fleet may be requisitioned for the transport of troops and weapons. Now that is going on, and that means that the signs that we are in a preparation for war, these signs are filtering down even to the level of the population. And that means we should really get the population to stand up against this, because if it comes to a war, Europe has no chance to survive. And I think we should absolutely mobilize the population to stand up against this. And we have prepared the English translation of the appeal of the OKV, which I would like Anastasia to read now before Mr. Bonatz actually makes some comments about it. And then I would urge the participants of the IPC dialogue today that we should discuss, the Putin proposal, and if there is a general agreement in one way or another, that we may be able to formulate it as an outcome of this meeting, because I think the urgency of the situation could not be exaggerated at all. So that is my initial remarks.
Thank you, Helga. I'm going to put in the chat a Google document with the text so that way people can read along with me and follow it if you'd like to. It's just a viewable version, not editable, but I'll read this statement. So it's titled Declaration of the Presidium of the East German Board of Trustees of Associations on President Putin's Peace Initiative. Our contribution is to support the peace initiative of the Russian president in such a way that it gains a broad echo and helps to help reason prevail in the interests of humanity. From the Presidium. We welcome the renewed peace initiative of the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, currently presented in his speech at the Russian Foreign Ministry on June 14th, 2024. His peace proposals are based on the vote of the population of the 4 new regions, as well as the multiple votes of the people of Crimea. They are also based on the facts on the battlefield. They show the genesis of the Ukraine conflict. This peace initiative is based on the continuity of Russia's desire for peace, which was openly documented to the world in the conclusion and attempted implementation of Minsk II, as well as in the willingness to negotiate and the treaty that is therefore about to be concluded in spring of 2022. Responses from the various sides reveal to the world who the aggressor is, who is constantly escalating, who is indifferent to countless human lives, and also what intentions lie behind it. In view of the suffering caused by war and aggression and the danger of this conflict escalating into a third world war, broad support for this initiative is an expression of the will of all rational people to survive. The warmongering, profit, and revenge-driven calls for Russia to be defeated are based on the mistaken assumption that the theater of war can be limited. This is not the case in the First and Second World Wars. With today's means, which can reach any target in the world in the shortest possible time, such an assumption is also evidence of a huge misjudgment and negligence of reality. Those calling for war and against negotiations believe that they themselves may have a safe chance of survival. Our contribution is to support the Russian president's peace initiative in such a way that it gains a broad echo and helps reason to prevail in the interests of humanity. We call on everyone we can reach to do so. This idea was the basis of our conference, Dialogue Instead of Weapons, on March 2023. This idea was also the basis of the International Conference of the German Peace Council and the OKV, with the participation of representatives of European members of the World Peace Council in September 2023, which we actively supported. Regardless of party affiliation, faith, or nationality, we call on everyone to join us in supporting Vladimir Putin's peace initiative. Dr. Matthias Werner, President of the OKV. So thank you very much for that. Again, I posted the translated version in the chat. You can continue to look that over. I'd like to remind everybody to please select interpretation. That you'll find that at the bottom of your screen. Select English, French, German, or Spanish, whichever language you need. And we're going to continue. I'd like to ask, sorry if I butcher your name, Joachim Bonatz, the Vice President of the East German Board of Trustees of Associations to speak. Thank you for joining us today.
Ich bedanke mich ganz herzlich für dieses Vortragen von Ihnen, für das Übersetzen der Erklärung. Heute fragte mich Frau Helga Zepp-LaRouche, ob ich ein paar Worte zu der Erklärung sagen kann, und das möchte ich jetzt tun. Ich bedanke mich auch dafür, dies tun zu dürfen. Mit 25 Dienstjahren in der DDR kenne ich die Wirkung der konventionellen und auch der Massenvernichtungsmittel, konventionellen Waffen und Massenvernichtungsmittel. Als Vizepräsident des österreichischen Kuratoriums habe ich seit Anfang des Jahres 2023 Kontakt mit Frau Helga Zepp-LaRouche. Sie sprach im März 2023 zu unserer OKV-Konferenz Dialog statt Waffen, die auf den Aufruf der Vernunft von Generalen aus unseren Verbänden zurückzuführen war. Damit will ich die Kontinuität unserer Friedensaktivitäten deutlich machen. Unser Verband wurde im Jahre 1994 gegründet. Warum haben wir jetzt diese Erklärung veröffentlicht? Ich verfolge jeden Tag die Lage an der Front, auch in der Ukraine, seit dem 24.02.2022. Bis Mitte, also von Mitte bis Ende 1923, schwankte die Anzahl der Opfer allein auf der ukrainischen Seite um die Zahl von 500. Im ersten Quartal 2024 stieg die Anzahl der täglichen Opfer dieser Seite auf 1000, im Mai auf 1500. Gestern erreichte sie erstmalig einen Wert von 2165 Personen. Das Leid, das damit verbunden ist, darf nicht ausgeblendet werden. Der Konflikt muss zu einer gerechten, dauerhaften Lösung geführt werden. Der Friedensvorschlag des russischen Präsidenten kommt zu einem Zeitpunkt, in dem die Gefahrenlage für die gesamte Welt einen besonders kritischen Punkt erreicht hat. Sie alle kennen die Rede des serbischen Präsidenten, Frau Helga Zepp-LaRouche wies beim Eingang darauf hin, und auch der vielen anderen, die diesen kritischen Punkt bestätigen. Sie sprechen in den Zoom-Konferenzen des Schiller-Instituts seit mehr als einem Jahr wöchentlich und sehr eindrucksvoll über Lösungen für eine friedliche Welt, die Ursachen und Entwicklung. Die Ideen finden aus meiner persönlichen Sicht ihren Niederschlag auch in dem Friedensvorschlag Russlands. Deshalb haben wir mit der Erklärung ausgesagt, wir reihen uns ein in die Unterstützer dieser Friedensaktivität, dieser Friedensinitiative, genauso wie die Rufe des Schiller-Instituts, des Präsidenten Ungarns, des Papstes und vieler anderer. Der russische Präsident ist eine der Seiten, die im Konflikt stehen. Die andere Seite ist der Block der US-NATO-Führung. Nur die beiden Seiten können den Konflikt beenden. Deshalb unsere Unterstützung für die Friedenserklärung Putins. Als Diplomkaufmann kenne ich, wie sicher auch alle Zuhörer, die finanzpolitischen und ökonomischen Hintergründe hinter dieser NATO-Osterweiterung als Ursache des Konfliktes. Noch heute gültig, sagt Schiller, der Namensgeber des Instituts, der beste Kaufmann ist der Krieg, er macht aus Eisen Gold. Geschrieben in Demetrius, Fragment von 1804, 1805. Unser Beitrag ist es, die Friedensinitiative des russischen Präsidenten zu unterstützen, sodass sie einen breiten Widerhall erlangt und beiträgt, die Vernunft im Interesse der Menschheit zum Durchbruch zu verhelfen. Das geschieht auch mit Ihrer Konferenz, Ihrer wöchentlichen. Das steht auch zu Beginn unserer Erklärung, wie Sie wissen. Über alle Schranken hinweg braucht es ein einiges Auftreten, nicht nur zur Verhinderung der Ausweitung, sondern für eine gerechte Beendigung des Konfliktes. Immer wieder treffe ich auf Schranken in Köpfen der Menschen. Diese sind im Interesse des Überlebens der Menschen zu überwinden, besonders für die Generation, und ich spreche als fast 80-Jähriger, für die Generation unserer Kinder, Enkel und Urenkel. Deshalb engagieren wir uns. Der Präsident der Russischen Föderation erklärte bei seiner Reise nach Vietnam den Journalisten in Bezug auf seinen Friedensvorschlag: Die Reaktion des Westens auf Friedensinitiativen war zu erwarten. Aber vernünftige Politiker werden darüber nachdenken, wenn sie den Konflikt beenden wollen. Bisher hat der Westen Moskau noch nicht kontaktiert, sagte Präsident Uschakow. Russland sagt aktuell, es muss derzeit nicht auf nukleare Mittel zurückgreifen. Aber aufgrund der Bemühungen des Feindes, die Schwelle des Einsatzes der Atomwaffen zu senken, denkt Russland über eine mögliche Änderung seiner Atomdoktrin nach. Putin sagt weiter, für Russland bedeutet eine strategische Niederlage das Ende der Staatlichkeit. Das heißt, es besteht kein Grund zur Angst, wir müssen bis zum Ende gehen. Ich glaube, das sagt sehr, sehr viel aus, wie ernst die Lage ist. Ich bedanke mich bei Ihnen sehr für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit und die Möglichkeit, ein paar Worte zu unserer Erklärung zu sagen. Danke.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for organizing this response, this appeal after the fact. We'll definitely have a lot of discussion, and I'm sure people will have questions and ideas as well. So thank you so much for joining us. Next, I want to make a slight adjustment to the agenda just because of time restrictions and some personal things that are going on. I'd like to ask for Ray McGovern, who is the co-founder of Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity and a former CIA analyst, to speak next. Are you there, Ray?
I am. Thank you.
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Hear you loud and
Yes.
clear.
Okay. First, vielen Dank, Herr Monatz. That was a very good briefing, very instructive and very important. I would like to pick up on a few things just to bring people up to date, as I normally do, as a former current intelligence officer. First and foremost, Putin, in his speech last Friday, exactly a week ago, took off the rhetorical gloves. Now he has pretty much taken off the concrete, tangible gloves. The rhetorical gloves, I just repeat what he said here. We have come dangerously close to the point of no return. Calls to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia, which continue, particularly in the US administration and in the US Congress, calls to defeat Russia in this way, despite the fact that Russia possesses the largest arsenal of nuclear weapons, that they demonstrate the extreme recklessness of Western politicians. Whoa, recklessness. Recklessness is the coin of the realm during presidential campaigns, such as we are in the midst of it. People make decisions based on their fortunes in becoming president, staying president, or whatever. And this is the overriding reality against which Putin and his...
No, I think that was a mistake.
Okay, fine. Well, let me continue here. What I notice is that the Western press, as Helga has already noticed, has been very measly, very meager in its coverage of what Putin has said and what he has described, for the most part, with extreme accuracy, okay? Small wonder that the Western press would avoid this, because it happens to be true, and it happens to be demonstrably true. Now, one of the things that Putin mentioned was that there was a deal back in March, April of 2022, okay, a deal which ensured that Ukraine would not be part of NATO, there would be a ceasefire, they would work out other things, and that deal was just about to be signed. It had already been initialed when Boris Johnson came in at the US and UK behest and put the kibosh, as we say, said to Zelensky, don't do that. We give you all the weapons you need for as long as it takes. Don't do that. And so that was thrown in the garbage. The date of Boris Johnson's visit was the 9th of April, 2022. It was no secret. If you read the Ukrainian press at the time, the whole story was told. Now we have the chief Ukrainian negotiator, David Arachmania, admitting to the Kiev Post and others that, yeah, this is exactly what happened. And actually, he said this with a sort of naivete, expressing extreme disappointment that Boris Johnson would behave in this way. After all, Arachmania had been working on an agreement since February 28th, namely 4 days after the Russian troops went into Ukraine. So all that good work, both in Belarus and in Turkey, had gone in vain. Now, why do I mention that? I mention that because since what is called the Istanbul agreements were mentioned by Mr. Putin, the New York Times drew out of its files the texts of some of the drafts of that agreement, but it forgot to mention that it was the West, that it was the U.S. and the U.K. in the person of Boris Johnson that nullified them, say they can't go forward. Why do I say that? I just say that because the West, and particularly the United States, is totally impoverished about the truth of all this, okay? There was a deal. The Russians stopped. They withdrew troops from around Kiev as a goodwill gesture. That is all reality. That is all fact, okay? And then what happened? The West came in and said, Zelensky, don't do that. What else does that indicate? Well, for those who say the Russians will never stop, they did stop. They stopped in early April, actually on the 29th of March, when they withdrew their troops from around Kiev. So for those who say the Russians won't stop with Ukraine, they'll go to Poland and now Baltic, I mean, that's hogwash. That's what the British call bollocks, okay? Now, what else? North Korea was mentioned. This is very big. But before that, just a little codicil. It's not only the US press, it's the German press, it's the whole European press that is keeping this from its citizens. And, you know, after the war, you could understand why the Germans and others would feel sort of like they had to act like children. Now they need to grow up and act like adults. I was in the office of the Bundestag chair of the Defense Committee about 7 years ago when exercise Anacondia was launched, you know. And I said, what is this all about? He said, well, Germany has not approved this. I said, Herr Helmich, Germany is participating in this. And he just threw up his hands. He knew that whatever he said as a prominent SPD member, that it wouldn't matter because his bosses were taking their orders from the United States. That has to stop. And the US and the Germans, all the Europeans need to spring up and say, look, your major media is obfuscating this whole thing. Let's get on with it. Lastly, North Korea. Wow. This came as a surprise to everyone. There is a mutual defense treaty now between Russia and North Korea. How many mutual defense treaties does Russia have? One, between Russia and North Korea. Mutual obligation to come to the aid of the other side if the other side is attacked. That is big. Lots of speculation about what kinds of help might be introduced to help the other side. For the nonce, they're talking about, at least on TV talk shows in Russia, they're talking about, well, if the French put in 20,000 troops, well, how about 50,000 troops from the North Korean army? I don't think it's going to go that way right away, at least. I think rather very sophisticated rocketry and all kinds of missilery will be given. Now, the last thing I'll say is, we know, and Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor to the president, knows that Putin gave the North Koreans a very, very sophisticated ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile. A couple of years ago. It's not Russia's most sophisticated, but it's the next one down, okay? It can reach every inch of the United States. It has decoys and it has shaft galore. It can be guided into place. And most important, it's mobile. To be mobile, you have to be solid fueled. It's solid fueled. Has it been tested? Yes, it's been tested twice. Now, what does that mean? That means that all this pulling of hair by the New York Times, the Financial Times, and everybody, oh, would Russia give sophisticated weaponry to North Korea in a strategic sense? Well, be the first to know, folks, they already have. So what is Putin trying to do? Is he trying to steal a march strategically? He's trying to deter, for God's sake. Deterrence is the name of the game. It's not a threat. It's simply say, look, we have the situation in Europe where we're winning, okay? If you, President Biden, and your advisors think it's so important not to lose in Ukraine before the election and thereby lose the election, if you think that's so important that you would threaten to use, well, what's next? Low yield nuclear weapons? Forget about it, because we not only can make trouble for you in the West, in the East, we have a defense ally now, not only a very good friend, China, but a literal defense cooperation ally. The name is North Korea. They're delighted to be with us. There's a new element of deterrence now, Mr. President. Please realize that and take the consequences for what they are. What we need to do is realize that the problem is with us. You know, we've identified the enemy. The enemy is us. The deal is out there. The deterrence is there. The only big fly in the ointment is the presidential election here, other elections elsewhere in Europe and elsewhere. And we, the people, need to stand up, get the truth out, and make sure our politicians don't bring us to the brink of non-existence. Sorry to be so down on this, but those are the facts as I see them. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Ray, for that response, which I think would be very helpful in thinking about the ongoing discussion and the proposal that was put forward by Mr. Bonatz. So thank you very much, Ray, for joining us today. Next, I would like to ask former President Donald Ramotar to speak. He's the former president of Guyana. Are you there?
I'm here.
Welcome. So wonderful to have you on, Your Excellency.
Thanks. I know that our meeting is taking place at a very tense time in the world today. The Western powers seem very determined to try to continue this war. And I think that this is a reflection of the fact that they feel that they're losing a lot of their influence, not only in the Middle East, but many other parts of the world, that people are now reacting towards some of the activities that they are doing. The whole question of seizing Russia's property or seizing other people's property. Many countries are seeing that as a big danger, and they're migrating towards the alternative. And that alternative that is being put now is the alternative of the BRICS. And then that meeting in October of this year will be extremely important. And more countries want to join BRICS. And that is because they want to have a greater freedom of action to deal with their own affairs without being afraid of sanctions and without being afraid of their properties and so forth being seized. So there seems to be a desperation stepping in on the part of a lot of Western governments, that they're afraid that they're losing some of their influence. And that is only recently too, we see in Africa that the French imperialists are being pushed out from many parts of Africa at this point in time. And Russia is kind of gaining its influence in Africa. And they are very, very worried, particularly in Niger, where you have the strategic minerals like uranium and so forth for mining. So this is part of the difficulties, and this is part of the reason why the West are pressing so hard and not wanting to have they don't want to have Ukraine signing a peace treaty with Russia as early as possible, even though they're losing the war in a big way. Losing the war in a pretty big way at this point in time. So they continue to want to fight at the expense of the British, and that is creating a lot of tensions now. And there even one of the other contradictions that has emerged is the fact that they're deliberately trying to keep Western Europe as weak as possible, so that Western Europe will continue to follow their dictation. But some countries we see now in Europe, many countries are beginning to shift their position from what is going on. So really, I think the proposal that has been put forward by Putin recently, the peace proposal, are very important because it offers them a way back. It offers them a way out of the kind of crisis that we are in. It is possibly the only sensible proposal on the table at this point in time, where all the parties can come out with some level of dignity without anyone actually losing. And if they continue to press in this direction, then therefore I agree with Mr. McGovern that Putin's position in Asia and in Africa and his move to Cuba is one to try to let them see the dangers that they are also putting themselves in. And it's one of deterrence. So in order for everyone to save face, I think the proposal that he has put forward is extremely realistic, and it needs the support of all the forces that we can mobilize at this point in time to ensure that we don't shift further and forward towards the Third World War, which could mean everyone understand the consequences of such a war. So I want to support the efforts that you're making, we are making towards pushing and supporting this proposal, and to try to get this proposal as widely circulated, because as was noticed, the Western countries, the Western media is not giving it the kind of support that it needs. And therefore, I think we have a responsibility to try in whatever way we can to make it known to the public and to try to use as much public pressure as possible to get this proposal on the table as a good basis to begin negotiation. Thank you for your attention, and apologize. I'm beginning to come down with a flu, it appears like.
Well, thank you, President Ramatar, for that. It was very much appreciated to get your views of the world coming from the BRICS and the Global South process. It's very important, and please feel better. Your voice, literally your voice, is very important. So take care of yourself, and I send my prayers to you that you have a fast recovery. Thank you for joining us. Next, I would like to ask for Colonel Alan Corvez, who is a consultant in international affairs and former advisor of the French Ministry of the Interior. Are you there, Colonel Corvez?
Ah, voilà. Vous m'entendez maintenant? Oui.
Yes.
Bien. Je pense qu'effectivement, nous sommes à un moment critique de la géopolitique mondiale, et toutes les interventions précédentes ont bien mis en avant ce point. Alors, on a mis en avant également le fait que les propositions de paix du président Poutine étaient très importantes et qu'elles ouvraient la voie à des négociations. Nous connaissons tous, puisque nous avons lu ces propositions, nous connaissons tous la situation. Et ce que je veux dire, c'est que l'Occident, on parle du Sud global et on peut parler de l'Occident global parce que c'est l'Occident, c'est les États-Unis, c'est l'Europe, mais c'est l'Australie, ce sont tous les pays qui s'alignent complètement sur la politique américaine. Et ces dirigeants occidentaux, non pas les peuples de ces pays, mais les dirigeants occidentaux sont devenus des nihilistes de la réalité géopolitique, de la réalité du moment, de la réalité des êtres humains sur la Terre. Et donc, les États-Unis, qui dirigent cette coalition de nihilistes, veulent préserver sa domination, son hégémonie du monde. Et c'est pour cela que nous avons actuellement ces deux conflits, l'Ukraine et la Palestine, car je répète et je tiens à ce que les gens comprennent bien qu'il s'agit là de deux conflits qui ont les mêmes racines et les mêmes raisons pour lesquelles ils ne s'arrêtent pas. Car derrière l'armée israélienne, derrière Tsahal en Palestine, ce sont les États-Unis d'Amérique, y compris par leur armement et partout, mais ce sont même eux qui dirigent la guerre. Il ne faut pas se tromper et croire que c'est parce qu'il y a un cabinet de guerre israélien qui est fou, qui se comporte de façon atroce comme il le fait. Ce sont les États-Unis d'Amérique directement qui dirigent ce conflit. Pourquoi en Ukraine comme en Palestine, les États-Unis poursuivent-ils des conflits qui sont perdus, car les deux sont déjà perdus militairement sur le terrain, uniquement dans l'espoir complètement vain, impossible, de maintenir la prédominance du dollar et de maintenir la prédominance mondiale des États-Unis. Et ceci, ça va durer jusqu'à l'élection présidentielle. Je pense que le président Poutine est suffisamment stratège et intelligent pour savoir les raisons profondes de cette négation des réalités, de cette négation de la réalité des forces en présence, et qu'il l'a dit d'ailleurs dans un discours précédent, où il a dit qu'on ne pouvait plus discuter avec les Occidentaux, les dirigeants occidentaux, car ils étaient devenus complètement irrationnels. C'est tout à fait exact. Donc, nous sommes dans une période où le nihilisme américain, avec tous ses vassaux qui sont la puissance de l'argent, la puissance de la finance internationale, qui a pu acheter tous les médias du monde pour manipuler les opinions publiques, car ce sont les dirigeants de l'Europe, ce sont les dirigeants de l'Occident qui sont corrompus et qui suivent la politique américaine. Les peuples en Europe, en tout cas, on l'a vu avec les élections européennes récemment, on l'a vu particulièrement en France, où je pense que le président Macron va être obligé de quitter la présidence, et donc il y aura des nouvelles élections présidentielles en France. En tout cas, j'analyse les résultats des élections comme ça. Et donc, nous sommes dans un moment où les peuples peuvent reprendre la parole et dire à leurs présidents corrompus qui suivent aveuglément les États-Unis d'Amérique et Israël, puisque c'est la même chose, et c'est le même combat en Palestine comme en Ukraine. Il faut que les peuples de l'Occident se révoltent, soit par des élections dans lesquelles ils votent contre leurs dirigeants. C'est ce que les Français ont fait récemment. Il faut qu'il y ait d'autres élections qui le montrent également, qui veuillent dire à ces gens-là, mais nous ne voulons plus de cette absurde hostilité contre la Russie. La Russie est un grand pays du continent européen avec lequel nous, Européens, nous devons nous entendre et coopérer. Nous avons d'ailleurs besoin énormément des richesses énergétiques de la Russie. Voilà. Donc, je pense que c'est au peuple européen et de l'Occident en général qu'il faut s'adresser, car les dirigeants, ils ne changeront pas, ils sont complètement corrompus, achetés par la finance internationale, qui possède tous les médias et toutes les arcanes des administrations, même les syndicats en France et dans le reste de l'Europe, même les syndicats ouvriers, les syndicats paysans sont pénétrés par cette corruption. Donc, il faut que le pouvoir revienne au peuple et je pense que le peuple, lui, ne veut pas de la guerre nucléaire. Juste un mot pour terminer sur la guerre nucléaire. Je n'y crois pas, mais je sens bien que quand il y a des fous qui sont au pouvoir, il y a quand même ce risque qu'ils franchissent le pas. Je ne crois pas, car il y a derrière l'État profond américain, il y a des experts qui, je pense, sont capables d'empêcher cette folie. Néanmoins, il faut bien comprendre qu'il y a actuellement en France, en tout cas, et en Europe, une propagande pour dire que la Russie est prête à attaquer avec des armes nucléaires, soi-disant parce que l'Occident ne veut pas reconnaître sa défaite en Ukraine. C'est faux. La doctrine nucléaire n'a pas changé. Simplement, comme l'a très bien expliqué Ray McGovern, et je le remercie pour ses explications, l'accord qu'il vient de signer avec la Corée du Nord est un accord qui met en valeur l'intelligence de Poutine parce qu'il montre ainsi aux États-Unis d'Amérique, qui est la première force, qu'il a des moyens annexes de pratiquer la dissuasion vis-à-vis de la dissuasion nucléaire vis-à-vis des États-Unis. D'ailleurs, l'envoi de sous-marins et de bateaux au large de Cuba était également un autre signe. Donc, je pense qu'il ne faut pas croire que du fait de la situation, la Russie serait prête à tirer en premier des armes nucléaires. Non, la doctrine russe n'a pas changé. L'arme nucléaire est uniquement une arme de dissuasion et une arme de défense contre les intérêts essentiels du pays. Voilà, je ne veux pas être trop long et donc je m'arrêterai là.
Thank you very much, Colonel Corvez, for that. It's a very useful assessment for the discussion. Okay, next I would like to ask Jacques Cheminade, who is the president of the Solidarité et Progress in France and former presidential candidate. Are you there, Jacques?
Yes. Yes.
Welcome.
Well, in the present situation, there are these elections. What happens is that, as Colonel Corvez said, it was a wave of discontent against Macron that splashed in the European elections. Macron, in that sense, as a leader, is finished. But the question is what's coming later. In that, unfortunately, all the other parties are like Macron, committed to deliver weapons to Ukraine. Some say not too far, some say less, but all are committed to war. So I decided to run a candidacy in the constituency of the French living abroad in Russia, China, Vietnam, Australia. It's all this part of the world. And I stressed that the future of the world depends on this part of the world. And this part of the world should give a lesson to the Europeans on how to solve the question of war and peace. And the only solution is our global architecture for security and development on behalf and for the benefits, for the profit of every country. And we have the BRICS, we have Putin's proposal, we have the group of 77, we have, of course, all the nations of the South. So we have to support that, what Putin proposed. He even proposed in this Eurasian conception of security that the countries belonging to NATO are favored, or he tells them you could join, they should join in our architecture of peace. So this on top of the proposals on Ukraine. So it's a two-step proposal. It's one, what we commented on Ukraine and the question of Ukraine inside Europe and Russia. And the second is at the highest level, Eurasia, which coheres, as Helga said, with all the work of our lives, inspired by the ideas of LaRouche. I was myself in Moscow in 2002, and all the authorities there were at that time expecting that the West will behave reasonably and they will agree with a system of economic and security order in Europe. They all were in favor of that, and they were betrayed, including all the leaders of Russia were betrayed. At the time, Putin was in favor of this common house of Europe, Gorbachev before him also, and they were betrayed. So now they are very clearly determined not to be betrayed anymore and to have something on to save the peace and to save the capacity to develop together at a world level. And I think at this point, the proposal from Putin should be taken not only seriously, but taken as a way out of the crisis where we are. And then we have a discussion, we have a negotiation. It's matter for diplomats and heads of state. And we should tell to our candidacies with us, but also we have decided to put pressure on all the candidates in France to agree on 3 points: no more delivery of weapons to Ukraine, dissolution of NATO, and peace based on common development. And we are going to indict them if they don't respond. So there we are in France. I think it concerns all Europe, but in a sense, France is a different factor because France has a nuclear capacity that other European countries don't have. And this nuclear capacity is still independent. So we have to get rid of Macron because he wants to put this nuclear capacity under the control of NATO de facto. So that's our campaign. And I think it's crucial for peace in Europe and peace in the whole world.
Thank you very much, Jacques. That's a very important point. I would like to ask Helga Zepp-LaRouche if you have a response to anyone or anything that's been said so far.
Well, only briefly, I would actually express my endorsement for your campaign, Jacques. However, I'm not a French voting person, so I would ask anybody who can spread the information that you are a candidate for the Asian-speaking world of the upcoming parliamentarian election to make sure that the people in China, Russia, Vietnam, and other Asian countries know about your campaign. I think that would be a big step for peace if you could help in that. And secondly, I would really like to inspire the discussion to reflect on the fact that, I think that if we would come out of this discussion with a, clarion call to spread the news about the Putin peace proposal, because as we already mentioned a couple of times, it's not discussed in the media. And I think that if we would come out with some kind of a endorsement of this proposal out of this discussion, I think we would do a giant step forward. I just want to thank all of you, and I think whatever you do in the next weeks and months is possibly decisive in making a resolution if mankind exists or not, because while there are periods in history where the individual can do very little, I think we are right now at one of these branching points where the subjective factor is playing a very, very important role. So the more mobilization and moral courage you can mobilize, that is really what you should concentrate on, and make it a desire of as many people in your environment to do likewise.